Joan is going to hand out the
Got
mic.
some mics here. The three of you are going to share this one.
Okay.
And the three of you are going to share this one. And you're actually number one, and you're number two, and Warren is three. So if you need to turn up the volume, let us know, and we'll come and fiddle with the volume.
And just so everyone understands who's here tonight, we have 6 of our candidates: Art Zimmerman, Bob Levy, Chappie Jones, Rich McCoy, Susan Marshland, and Tim Gildersleeve. Mr. Wong is in Sacramento and could not be with us tonight. So we can start with the first question. I think we discussed how this is going to work. We'll start with you, Art. The first question is a 60-second question. What would you do the same, and what would you do differently from your District 1 predecessors?
Well, probably the number one thing I like that Pete did was the D1 leadership group. That is a fantastic organization, and I think that's, kudos to him. I would continue with that. I think Pete, though, is a little out of touch with what the people want in his district, and I think that's where I'll be different. I will make sure that I'm more touched, more community meetings, and try to reach out. This is a great venue for meetings like this to participate in, and that's why I love that paddles up right away. I like that. Good job. I would be more open to communication with the neighborhood groups. Thanks.
Bob?
Thank you very much. My answer is very similar. I think that what Pete's done an outstanding job is not only with the D1 leadership group, but it's also promoting neighborhood associations. I founded the Easterbrook Neighborhood Association somewhat because Pete helped prompt that. And so I think he's done a great job with the neighborhood associations. He's done a great job with the D1 leadership group. What I do a little differently is I would listen to the constituents a little more so. There's a couple of great examples where he really wasn't in sync with the neighbors, and that was McDonald's drive-through on Bollinger and Mice Park. In both those instances, he was sort of at odds with the neighborhood associations. And so I think I would do a little better job of being in touch with the neighbors.
Chappie?
I just want to echo that as well. Pete has done an amazing job with the D1 leadership group, helping establish neighborhood associations, as well as the work he's done in terms of the structural deficit and pitch reform. I would definitely continue that work that he's done and make sure that that's followed through so that we can get the city's finances under control. As far as what I would do differently, we each have our different styles. And I've actually met with and interacted with several of you in this audience. So my style is collaborative. I want to hear from you. I want to work with you. I want you to be part of the process every step of the way in terms of the decisions that the city makes. So whether it's building out Santana Row, or opening up a street, or opening a park, or closing something, I want the neighborhood and the community to feel like they were part of the process every step of the way.
Rich?
Thank you. I've spent probably the last 5 years or so working with Pete. I'd like to say I walk in his footsteps, but I don't wear his shoes. He's done some great things with the D1 leadership group, also some of the area's neighborhood associations. But I have to agree with some of my colleagues here that recently he has almost lost touch with some of the citizens. And myself, last 5 years, I've probably been to 70% of the city council meetings and 95% of the rules committee meetings. And I've seen what goes on. I've seen him talk. I've seen things that he's done and not done. And you can see from my own literature, I have a telephone there because I want to listen to people. You are the people that I work for. You are the people that I would have to respond to. You're the people whose voice needs to be heard at City Hall. And I would make sure I listen to you and say that voice.
Susan?
Thank you. I would do much of the same and keep the library hours that he has, but I would do a little bit more than that. And I also want to compliment their staff. Their staff, if you call them, they get back to you very quickly. You have a resolution. I think that I would definitely maintain that. What would be different about me is that one of my platforms is community building, and we used to have community events at Rainbow Park, and music, and I like to do that. I heard that from the community, and people would like to see that happen. I also would use technology to have a more increased feedback loop, because sometimes people can't come to City Hall and they have concerns, and we'd be able to address those issues. The other is to cover all of District 1 with neighborhood associations, be available 7 days a week. I would do that. And the other thing is, when I attended a Winchester Ranch meeting early on, I witnessed the council person not standing up for the mobile parks, and I was the first one that stood for them. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, the things that I would say,
I'm sorry, Tim.
keeping the office hours that Pete has right now, that is very important to me to have that accessibility, keep that the same, be as direct as Pete is. I'm very direct, if you get to know me. I'll be even more direct than him, sometimes brutally direct. I liked the disability fair. I definitely want to keep that going. That's near and dear to my heart, since that's something that I work in the field that I work in, picking up disabled and seniors, and definitely the structure of the neighborhood groups. Differences, I'm going to take a very hard line stand on making sure that I listen to voter input. So I really want to put together the neighborhood groups and get votes on what we want on the issues. I definitely have a different stand as far as helping people, the poor, elderly, and disabled. I have a different financial view on taxes and bonds than he does. And I just want to stand for the lower income seniors and disabled. Thank you.
Just before I start.
Could we make a suggestion that you eat the mic when you speak, because some of the people in the back can't hear you? And also, we're suggesting that I know it takes time, but if you could stand up, then they'll see your face better.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we'll go to question number 2. When voting on issues, what will you do if your beliefs conflict with the beliefs of the majority of your constituents? This is a 30-second question.
Very good question. I don't think there's a single answer for that. I would be elected to both lead and to represent the neighborhoods. And so on issues that are really extremely important to the neighbors, and I disagree, I would work with them to the greatest extent possible to see where there's the middle ground. If there's an issue I'm really firmly, strongly in favor of, and the residents don't believe it, I sometimes will have to take that leadership role. Most of the time, I will follow the lead of the neighbors, but not always.
Thank you, Bob. Chappie?
For most things, I'm not an absolutist. I'm looking for solutions to solve problems and address the issues that affect our quality of life. So I would go through the process of taking as much input and information from the residents, from the community, from all the key stakeholders, and process that and make an educated, intelligent decision on what's in the best interest of the community and the city of San Jose. So that's the process that I would go through to make those kind of decisions.
Thank you. Rich?
As I've already stated, you are the people who employ us. We work for you. However, sometimes it requires the people to have information they may not have. A good example was the graffiti on the railroad overpass down there on 280. Why didn't the city do something about it, was everybody saying? Well, that property belonged to Southern Pacific, so the city couldn't really do anything. That was the answer to the question. By knowing more, you're able to come up with a better decision. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to change your mind, but at least you'll have the facts. And I want to listen to you because I'm going to be working for you.
Thank you. Susan?
So on contentious issues, what I'd also would do, because I'm an educator, I believe in educating people, and you can use the budget platform as a way that how you go out and educate people, because sometimes there's things that you see and some things you like and some things you don't, and I would just use the same approach. Say, for example, if it was transportation, and we know that they're talking about a potential tax, I would bring that out to you and listen to everybody. Look at the short term, long term, and also look at it for San Jose and the region. Thank you.
Tim?
As I've said already, I'm going to take a real hardline stand that the voters are going to be my boss. And as a matter of fact, I've got a little thing here from the IPA year-end report that shows that the voters are at the top of the organizational chart, and I'm going to really take that seriously. But if I disagree with what the voters are saying, I'm going to say to you why I disagree with you, but you're the boss, like the organizational chart shows, so you're going to win out almost every time. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. We're back to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is a great question. You know, you're voting for us. We're representing you, so we're going to try to take. I'm going to try to take a hard line on almost every issue. That whatever you guys want, that's what we're going to do. Because you're our boss. You vote us in, and we need to back you up. A lot of us up here are not backed by special interest groups or unions or anything. We're not going to allow those people to creep in and take the vote away from you guys. We'll make sure we back you up. I like last week we were here for the budget meeting, and I like those type of forums. And those are the kind of things we need to continue with to try to get that message out.
Thank you. We'll go to question number 3. Chappie, you'll start this off. It's a 60-second question. Traffic congestion is a problem in District 1, not only around Santana Row and Valley Fair, but at all major intersections along Stevens Creek Boulevard. Drivers often have to wait 15 minutes or more to traverse the half-mile stretch on Stevens Creek approaching Winchester. This problem is diminishing our quality of life and causing delays for first responders. Increased development continues to add more traffic to the problem. What steps can the city take to improve traffic flow in this area? 60 seconds.
Actually, I was held up in traffic on my way up here. So I experienced it firsthand. It's a very complex problem. San Jose is going to grow. We have to have a place for our children and grandchildren to live. And with that growth comes traffic. Unless, you know, I'm sure all of you or most of you probably drove here today instead of taking, riding your bicycle or taking public transportation. We live in a car-centric society. So I just wanted to kind of lay that foundation. So we have to expect that as we grow, that the traffic is going to be impacted. Now what we can do about it, we can do things like have work with our regional partners, because a lot of that traffic is affected by Santa Clara, it's affected by Cupertino. Work with our regional partners to come up with an overarching strategy and plan to address it, as well as working with the transportation department. But each situation, each corner, each intersection is different, and it involves a unique and different solution to the problem.
Thank you. Rich?
No doubt that San Jose has a severe traffic problem. Some intersections are worse than others. We can't go out. The only way we can go, like San Francisco, is up. And so the urban villages are being designed for the 2040 plan to be put in areas. But the problem is, they're going to live over there, and they're going to work over there. Forcing them to take public transportation or ride their bikes is not a practicality. We're in California. California was built around the automobile. And it's going to be harder than heck to get the people out of their automobile. And public transportation goes from nowhere to nowhere, so you can't rely on that. So we're going to continue with our cars. The idea of intersection control, maybe some stoplights need to be eliminated. Maybe some of them need to be timed. Maybe some of them need to have no further development. Because if the first responders can't get through them, like happened on Winchester during the Santana fire, the fire trucks couldn't get across 280 because of the congestion. And now they want to expand it there. Same thing down here with 280 and Saratoga. How do you respond to those things? How do you make it easy for people to get on and off from work?
Susan?
Yeah, we hear about traffic congestion all the time, but what I want to talk about is that we have a stellar department with the Department of Transportation led by Hans Larson. And what they're doing right now is they actually are studying these problems, and this summer they're opening up the two centers to really look at how they sync some of the traffic lights. But that's happened sometime this summer. I'm not sure if it's June, July, so that would help with alleviation. So now we can use technology to be able to move traffic a little bit faster. The other part is working with regional partners with VTA. We know that the line 23 comes down, and there's going to be some enhancements coming in 2013 with 13 different stops. Areas along Stevens Creek as the Apple campus is developed. So working with VTA and other parties to address that, we should be able to improve it along with what I call the complete streets, where you have more walkable and bikeable areas for people, get people off the roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
First of all, in my many conversations with people, they've agreed with me that we're overdeveloped. That's just my personal opinion. If the voters don't believe that, then I will do what the voters want, but I believe we are overdeveloped. And I have a concern about this, not only as a resident that lives here, you know, I'm not going to stay here if we continue, if we're going to bring in 400,000 more people. So I want to state that up front. We're not going to be able to, I don't think we can do too much about the traffic currently, except do some traffic studies and come up with some ideas and maybe have some shuttles. But if we're going to continue this path that we're going with urban villages, I really don't honestly think there's much we're going to be able to do about the traffic and congestion that's going to result. This is going to be a byproduct of 400,000 more people coming in. Thank you.
Okay, Art, back to you.
Yeah, traffic sucks. That's the bottom line. And everybody here, I can guarantee, probably drove their car here. You know, everybody drove here. So until we change that mindset to public transit, because that's not going to happen. I like my car. I like driving my car. We're going to have congestion. The underlying issue is that we are a job-poor city. We have more people here inside San Jose at night because people drive back home from their job up the peninsula, up in Fremont. And we really need to get more jobs locally and not have people commuting all the time. That's a big issue. The other thing is, I like what Google has done and Apple has done. They can use the buses to transport large numbers of their employees, and I think that is a great idea. We should promote more of that in the city. And the last thing, I'm looking at the panel and I lost my train of thought.
Well, thank you. I agree with Art. Traffic sucks. I got stuck in traffic for 20 minutes a couple days ago, just trying to get through 2 intersections on Saratoga. I think Saratoga is one of the worst intersections that we have in the city. What we need to do to help resolve some of the traffic problems along Stevens Creek is to, for one thing, get that overpass, that pedestrian overpass from Santana Row to Valley Fair. That should have been put in place long, long ago. We also need to do the traffic studies, make sure the timing of the lights are sequenced correctly. But when you work with all the other jurisdictions like VTA, the county, the other cities to make sure that it's done in a very coordinated fashion. The other thing we need to do is work with the development community, because whenever a development proposal comes in, we need to make sure that developer provides mitigation measures to take care of the traffic impacts they cause. And so that's a real key factor when they put in the developments at the Century 21, is we need to make sure we hold the line with those developers and say, you're paying for the impacts.
Thank you. The next question is a 60-second question. Retirement and salary programs for city employees are underfunded. This has resulted in an additional taxpayer liability of several $million each year in the loss of employees citywide. The city tried to alleviate part of this problem with Measure B. Do you support Measure B, or do you support a different plan to fund city retirement and salary programs? Rich,
I'm the first one to take shots at
you're number one.
Measure B was enacted by the voters by a 7% margin 4 years ago. That was a good idea at the time. I'm an engineer. I looked at the graphs the mayor had, and it looked good to me. He said, we got to cut costs or else the city's going to go bankrupt. However, as it turned out 4 years later, Measure B has not produced the results 100%. We're losing more officers. We can't even fill the number allocation we have for officers right now. There's 200 short city. Hiring more officers is not going to help because we can't even fill the ones we have. Measure B needs to be revisited. People who work as a senior, such as myself, can't live off the retirement. They need to be given a decent amount of money to have a decent living and live in retirement in a way that's comfortable for them and not have to worry about they're going to get a paycheck tomorrow or not, or they're going to pay for medicine, they're going to pay for groceries. They need to be taken care of, and retirement is the answer to that.
Susan?
I support looking at and tackling the unfunded liabilities. But with Measure B, the problem is there was too many pieces that were added into Measure B, and now we're in a real dilemma where we need, possibly what will happen, that will have to come back to the voters. Unfortunately, you know, in 1997, it was 75% of what people were getting instead of, it went up to 90%. So we need to figure out how we go back to the table and figure out how we're going to fund those pieces. The other piece is, right now we have a morale problem. It's not just with police, it's also in other departments. We've lost so many good, talented people with historical data that have left the city of San Jose. So that's the inverse piece of Measure B of the outcome. It's happening in planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Jim?
Okay, first of all, let me be blunt straight. I voted no on Measure B. And the reason I voted no, and I understand that 70% of the people voted yes, but I voted no because of the principle of collective bargaining, of the collective bargaining process. That's the reason why. Not that we don't have a problem, everybody knows that, but you can't violate a collective bargaining process. Not only does it affect union workers if the collective bargaining process goes away, but it affects all other workers too. So I just want to bring up that point why I voted no. We have to revisit Measure B. We need to, we need to go directly to the workers and try to restore relationship between management and the workers, which is very badly damaged right now. That's what we got to do. I think we also got to keep in mind that when we're going to make fiscal decisions, it isn't just about money. There's people behind the money. It's not just about money. There's people that are involved in these fiscal decisions. I am for a tax increase also. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Art.
Boy, 60 seconds for a very tough question. That's very much like everybody else says, Measure B needs to be revisited. I voted yes for Measure B. I thought it was a good idea at the time. The morale in the city with police is terrible right now, and they don't feel like we have their back anymore. And it doesn't matter how many academies, we're adding a third academy, we're not going to get anybody out of that academy to stay here. They're going to other departments. We need to revisit it. And I've done a couple ride-alongs with a couple senior cops, and they tell me they're ready to go back to the table and bargain and discuss it and come up with a happy medium. The 75%, we talked about that a little bit, of the is kind of the standard level of retirement, and what we're currently at is just too low to keep the people we have or attract new people. So we need to make some changes. We need to get back to the table. We need to bargain and make things happen and bring the morale up in the city, because it's not just the police, it's across the board.
Thank you. Tom?
Yes, thank you. We have a serious, structural deficit problem, partially due to the pensions. I think everybody knows that. The staff knows it, the unions know it, everybody knows it. So the real key is getting back to the bargaining table. I have a master's in urban planning. A lot of my friends went into the public sector, and I went into the private sector. I'm now 57 years old, and most of my friends are now retired. And they're often working for going back to fill the positions that we can't keep in San Jose. And I mean, we're expecting my friends to live to 90 years old. We're in a situation where people can't be retiring at 55 years old and living to 90 and expect to be able to pay for it. Everybody knows that, but it's not a problem with San Jose alone. It's a problem throughout the entire state. And the real solution is probably going to have to be held at the state level. But San Jose has to get back to the bargaining table with the staff, and everybody knows that, and I think we just need to make sure that happens.
Champion?
10 years ago, over 10 years ago, the city council made promises to the city's employees and to labor that they couldn't keep. And the city was bleeding red ink ever since. Even during the boom times, let's forget about the Great Recession, even during the boom times, the city was running a deficit. That is why over 70% of you in the audience voted in favor of Measure B, because it was a solution to that problem. The city was going bankrupt. I support Measure B. I will take the leadership position to continue to support Measure B, but I am flexible to work with the unions, to work with labor, to come up with an alternate solution. Again, I'm not an absolutist. I am focused in on finding solutions. And the solution might be Measure B, the solution might be through negotiations, but the bottom line is finding a solution so that we can address the retirement and pension issue so the city can start to restore the services that have been cut over the last 2 years.
At this point, just let me remind you that we want the audience questions to be submitted in the next 10 minutes. So if you have a question, look for someone with one of those red tags and give it to them so that we can get to those questions after we proceed through the next questions for our candidates. The next question is a two-part question. And Susan, we're going to start with you. Our neighborhood is at the confluence of three proposed urban villages: Stevens Creek, Winchester Boulevard, and Valley Fair Santana Row. Even though Valley Fair Santana Row has been designated as a future urban village, it's currently being built outside of this concept. When planning an urban village, at what point do you feel the surrounding neighborhoods should be involved? This is a 30-second question. Susan, why don't you take a crack at this, and then the second part of this question I'll ask Tim to start.
So I start with the first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you'll take this first.
Yeah. So what has to happen, and something that I've also brought to the people, is that we have we have a plan that has happened in downtown San Jose where they brought the community together to get their input. So what has to happen early on is that you need to have community involvement early on so it can reflect your concerns about traffic and development, and that is something that, thank you.
Tim?
Okay, as I stated, I'm not very happy about the overdevelopment. I'm going to be emphasizing this. This is just me. Like I said, if the voters like this direction, then we continue to go this direction. I'm unhappy. But definitely, I think the problem that began in the first place is there wasn't enough neighborhood input. I say 100% neighborhood input. If you want to continue this direction, we go this direction. If you want to stop it, then we need to revisit the whole plan, and the neighborhood needs to be involved. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, the 2040 plan, and we come out with a new master plan about every 10 years, and that's our current master plan. And I'm not real big on the urban village concept, and it has to be about a case-by-case basis. We just can't be blanketing any new construction is going to be the urban village concept. We need to make sure that we get tons of input from the neighbors in that neighborhood to make sure that's what they want, and that we have them at the very beginning of the process get their input and their help on developing their neighborhood, and not allow the city hall to always make all the decisions.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are two questions. The first question is, I think we need to take a step back and look at the urban village from the high-level perspective. We want to see piecemeal development going on the Century 21 side, on the Santana Row side, on the Valley Fair side. We need to take the step back and do a specific plan that addresses them all. And I'd like to see things slowed down a little bit with these proposals. The second piece is we need to get the neighbors in at the very, very beginning, because an educated neighborhood is, oh, I'm already done.
If I'm elected to the city council, I will take the leadership role in reaching out to the community. As soon as we get wind of any concept, any development, any idea of doing anything that affects your neighborhood, and I don't mean just people within 300 yards or 300 feet or a half mile, I'm talking about affects the whole community, I will take the leadership to reach out to you and make sure that you're engaged, even if I have to knock on your door and drag you to some of these community meetings. I will take that leadership role.
Thank you. Rich?
Well, I've already spoken about urban villages. They're a great concept. Unfortunately, they don't seem to work because a lot of the units within these urban villages are not affordable by most of the people in San Jose. If you make a minimum wage in San Jose working 40 hours a week, you can't afford one of them. And they're also out in places where people don't work. Santa Clara did a very good job. They built one down along San Tomas Expressway, right in next to North San Jose. The people who live there, work in that area. They can walk to work. They can bike to work. They can get to work easy. And that's the main concept of the urban village.
The second part of this question, Tim, relates again to urban villages. How should the city ensure adequate water, sewage, and open space as these urban villages are again being built? This is a 60-second question.
More time.
This is definitely a very complicated one. Again, first of all, we're going to have to take another look at this plan, and that's up to the voters of this district and of San Jose whether we want to take another look at it. I am concerned that when we start talking about these resources that are just mentioned in the questions, I'm definitely concerned about that. More urban villages, more buildings, more people, we're going to need more water, more resources, more firefighters, more police officers, more schools. So we're talking about more resources. You know, if we don't have the revenue, we're going to be in a tight situation. I'd say that it's going to be dicey. Either taxes or we're going to need more revenue coming in from businesses. It's going to be a dicey situation.
Thank you. Art?
Yeah, so, you know, right now we have anybody that's doing a new project, or there's implementation where they have to have open space, so that we currently have that on the books right now. I would like to see that extended out and increased, and more open space, more parks, and they have a credit system where they can buy a park somewhere else. I don't buy that concept. I work with a group called Kaboom, and they try to put a park in within a half mile of every kid out there, and I would like to see us make sure we have that kind of a concept and that kind of a city, so every child has a place to play, and you just can't buy your way out of putting an open space in somewhere because you want to put more units in, and it's a great idea for developers, but not a great idea for the city of San Jose.
Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is trying to find available parkland and open space lands when you're doing this. What's important is we make sure that we follow the letter of the law with the PDO-PIO ordinance, which in essence is the ordinance that says you have to pay or provide 3.5 acres of land for every 1,000 people that are in your development. And you have to work very closely with the developers to make sure that they provide this parkland. The developers play lots of interesting games as far as private open space and using walkways as private open space and so forth. But it's going to take someone that really understands the situation to work with the developers to make sure that they provide open space. The other thing is we're going to have to think outside the box. They're going to have to put a park on top of the parking garages. And do things that are different and creative, because we have limited the amount of space we use. And so we have to be able to think a little bit differently than in the future. We need places where people can throw a football and a frisbee and just play, but we also need to provide other types of recreational areas. And we are going to have to think more differently.
Thank you.
In District 1, we have a lack of open space, and the district is already built out. So coming up with creative ideas in terms of open space, parkland, would be very difficult in District 1. If you're talking about developing urban villages in District 1, and again, it's Envision 2040, so it's a vision and a concept, but we're talking about actual practical execution of that. And in District 1, we're going to have a process where we work with the community, we get as much input as possible, and we hold the developers and the property owners accountable in terms of having the resources in place in terms of traffic impact, in terms of infrastructure is not going to have a negative impact on your quality of life as residents that surround those urban villages. So that's a key part of what we need to do.
Rich?
Thank you. We all know right now we're facing a drought. Adding more users of water is only going to make things worse. They've been talking about global warming. The droughts are going to be happening more and more often. Our infrastructure, the supplies of both the water and the sewer, are being taxed to their limit. Just in our street last week, they had to have the sewer people come out and do some repairs. These things need to be upgraded as they are, let alone add more capacity to them. So adding more people to the limited open space that we have, which is not a lot out here in D1, because this area was actually developed in the late 50s, early 60s, when they had a different plan. There's not a lot of open space left, so that what you have, you don't want to fill up with apartments in urban villages right now. You want an open space for the kids. You want to be able to get out there and run your dog, let your kids play, and use that open space that we have very limited of.
Thank you. Susan?
So what I'd like to address first is the gray water, using gray water. We've heard a lot about that, and the Santa Clara Valley District has you can get it $100 for people to install it. So they talk about the 2040 about the usage of water, and I think that we need to kind of strengthen that usage, because you can use it on trees and other places. So that would decrease that amount. In the 2040 plan, they also talk about open space. We know in District 1, we don't have a lot of open space, but there's ways that we can come up with creative ideas. I personally like to see something happen at the Centuries. That would be a perfect place to have a parks place that would be open for families. Already in District 1, we are limited on places for family outings, and there are ways to be able to look at increasing parklands by using private and public partnerships. The city of Chicago is also looking at that, and we also need to have different places for seniors to be able to enjoy. Thank you.
Art, we're back to you with the last of these longer questions. This is a 60-second question. Federal Realty has leased the Century Theater property and intends to develop it. What steps would you take to bring the city, the developer, and the neighboring communities together to create an acceptable development plan for this property? 60 seconds.
Well, I'm glad I get to go first, because I got the best answer for it. Sorry guys. The big issue is that the 1986 Mobile Park Act of California allows you to purchase the mobile home park from the developer, or from whoever currently owns it, along with Title 20 from the state. You have that right. But in almost 30 years, not one mobile park has done so, has been successful in purchasing the property. So I'm going to tell you right now, if I'm voted as city council, I will do whatever I can to make sure that variance does not go through and the mobile park is retained.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to repeat the answer I did a little while ago. I think we need to take that step back and look at the specific plan, put a specific plan in place for the urban village. That's a big part of this urban village, and I'd like to see us plan it in conjunction with the rest of the development proposals that are going to go around here. We do need to provide open space.